Hi, I'm Annie, and I'm here today with Dr. Larry Keig, and we're going to have a little discussion and see if I can learn a little bit about the difference between Dugan and Diamond, because I've always had a little bit of confusion. I know that some patterns we say are Dugan, some we say are Diamond, some are in between. So if you can help me out, I'd like to learn a little bit of the history. So, when did Dugan start making Carnival glass?
Dugan introduced Carnival glass in 1909.
Okay.
And it continued making Carnival glass until the Dugan factory was sold in mid-1913.
So only 4 years.
Just the 4 years.
That's a short time frame.
They produced a tremendous amount of Carnival glass during those 4 years.
Oh, absolutely. So within those 4 years, what we know about Dugan is they did some colors that were fairly specific that we can help build a timeline.
Right.
And so the first color that they probably introduced in 1909 was?
Peach opal.
Okay.
And peach opal is Dugan's signature color.
Absolutely.
And it was made in tremendous quantities and in a wide range of quality.
Exactly. And the opal can be, you know, very deep, or it can be very shallow, but Dugan is what you think when you think peach opal.
Yes, and the surface color ranges from a very bright orange to a very washed out, whatever you want to call it, peach or whatever.
Right. And they probably ran peach opal how long? They were in existence for 4 years. How long did they run peach opal?
They made peach opal all 4 years.
All 4 years, okay. So the next most the next color that was one of Dugan's signature colors. And by the way, there were 6 of them, right?
6 colors altogether.
Right. And those 6 include?
Besides peach opal, that would be amethyst purple, white, green, marigold, and blue.
Okay. So after peach opal, which ran all 4 years, they probably started with which color next?
Almost certainly amethyst purple.
And they did an awesome job with amethyst purple. But there's a wide range within that.
It goes beyond what we consider amethyst and purple. The range is generally considered from a very light amethyst or lavender to a very dark color that's identifiable only when the piece is held up to a bright light.
Okay, and they tend to look almost black.
They do look black, unless you're looking at them through a black light.
Right, and if you look at them into a real bright light, you told me before one time that you could basically see there were 2 different tones, I guess I would call it.
That's what I would describe it as, essentially two different base colors within that
base glass
color. One is a very dark purple that you can see through very bright light. The other has a reddish tint that we often refer to as fiery amethyst.
Okay, and the other one that was purple you called oxblood, right?
That's right. At least I call it oxblood.
Yeah. Okay, so they went from peach opal into the amethyst, and the amethyst probably ran how many years? Did they?
The amethyst was probably introduced in 1910, and then, of course, continued throughout
the production years.
Those production years.
Okay, so peach opal for 4, amethyst purple for probably 3-ish.
Or a little more.
Or a little more. And so, what do you think they went into next?
I think it was probably Marigold, and Marigold was probably also introduced in 1910.
Okay.
And of course it continued
Throughout.
through 1913, but it was made in relatively limited quantities during that 4-year period.
Which is interesting. And then after Marigold, we know that then we're left with 3 colors, right? And
That's
the next
right.
one probably,
The next one was introduced was white for sure.
Okay.
And we know it was introduced in 1911.
okay, so,
And then we also know that green was introduced in 1911. We don't know exactly when production of green came to an end, but maybe that same year because so little green is known.
absolutely, Dugan green is tough.
That's right.
Yeah, limited quantities and limited patterns. So,
Right, very limited patterns.
right. So white ran from 1911 to the end. Green was a very short run, and blue was the other color that they did.
Yes, and blue was introduced probably in mid-1912.
Okay, so
And
again, right toward the end of their ownership.
Yeah, no more than a year,
Okay,
and probably a little less.
okay. And so that encompasses what we know of Dugan's colors and the time frame that they ran.
Exactly.
And then it all ended in 1913
It ended July 1st, 1913,
when
when the company was sold to a different management, and the Dugans for whom the company was named moved on.
Okay. We're going to continue our discussion by talking now about Diamond. So, Dugan finished up in mid-1913
Right.
because they were bought out by Diamond Glass.
And a group of investors, and they named the company Diamond.
Ah. And Diamond ran for how long?
Diamond ran from mid-1913 through whenever the fire destroyed the plant in 1931.
Okay. And we were talking with Dugan about the colors and how we could identify possibly which company was running at the time. And what we had determined with Dugan was that they had 6 basic colors that they ran. Did Diamond continue with those colors when they took over?
In one form or another, they did continue all 6 for various amounts of time.
So starting with peach opal, which was a predominant color for Dugan, Diamond continued with peach opal for...
Diamond continued with peach opal probably until 1915-16 or so, but in much lesser quantities, and certainly not to the same degree of quality.
Right.
Because much of the peach opalescent produced by Diamond isn't of very high quality.
And I if I think about it, I think very often they didn't have as much opal. It wasn't a strong marigold. It was obviously a lesser quality.
That's right. They didn't invest enough in the quality of color.
Okay. So that takes care of peach opal. What about amethyst purple?
The amethyst purple, they continued in primarily the lighter shades,
Okay.
not the darkest shades of purple at all, and limited in what we would describe as purple as opposed to amethyst.
Okay.
And then they also produced some of Carnival that we call lavender and very light amethyst.
Okay. And that ran for about how long, do you think?
That ran in one form or another for a long time, but as time wore on, less and less glass was produced by Diamond in amethyst of any shade.
Okay. One of the next ones that we talked about was marigold for Diamond, which wasn't a real high number of pieces for a company. But Diamond, when they took on marigold, which I assume they did.
They did.
Okay. How long did that run?
That ran for the entire range of the diamond years, and in great quantity, if not necessarily very good quality.
Okay, so
But they made just vast amounts of marigold over a period of
over 25 years.
over 25 years or so.
Okay, so that's a lot of marigold. And white was one of Dugan's colors.
It was, and it was produced for a little while after Diamond took over the factory, probably for 2 or 3 years
Okay.
during the earliest of Diamond's years.
Okay. And then they reintroduced it later.
Then it was reintroduced sometime probably between 1922 and 1924 in stretch glass and some Carnival glass
Patterns. Mhm.
Not too many, but a few.
Okay. Green. Did they bring in green?
They did. They brought in green for a few years too. Not very many patterns, but some very nicely colored
Okay.
green pieces.
So short period of time, and blue was one of the last color that we said Dugan actually did much of, or did some of, not much of. And so Diamond did blue?
Diamond continued blue for several years in certain patterns and shapes. And it's interesting that a lot of patterns that we describe as blue were made by quote Dugan were actually made by Diamond.
I was going to say one of the things I can remember hearing early on was that Dugan green and Dugan blue were very rare. And I think they truly are quite scarce if they were actually Dugan.
Especially Dugan green.
If they were Dugan, yes, absolutely. Yep. Okay, so that takes us up to probably what year? They were doing the blue for Diamond up into the 20s, probably?
Probably not quite that long. I think that Dugan blue is associated with the mid-teen, at the most maybe 1917, 1918.
So Diamond blue was more before 1920.
Right.
Okay.
Because you hardly see any diamond blue that was made in patterns
Okay.
that Dugan or the Diamond created
Okay.
after 1915.
Okay. So once those main colors were kind of done, Diamond then moved into a new range of colors. And what were those?
They came out with a range of colors that we call the pastels.
Okay.
The earliest pastel, of course, was white, and that was made by both Dugan and Diamond. Diamond in relatively small quantities, but then around somewhere between 1916 and 1917, Dugan introduced 3 blue shades. One was Celeste / Sapphire, another was Ice Blue, and the third was Aqua.
And I think with those 3, the Ice Blue and the Celeste Sapphire are very different tones. The Ice Blue is a very, very, very pale blue.
Yeah,
right?
really light, really, really light.
And the Sapphire Celeste, I always had it described to me as being much like the window cleaner Windex blue, which is a much stronger color.
I think the Windex / blue color is a nice way of describing what we see in Carnival.
I can picture it. I
I
can pick up the
can,
bottle
too.
and I can see it in my head.
Yeah, because I could go up and get my Windex bottle, and it would look much like the
Celeste Sapphire.
Celeste Sapphire that
Yeah.
we see.
And then the Aqua that they made.
Before we do the Aqua, we should point out that the Celeste blue usually has a stretchy effect. The Sapphire blue doesn't.
Typically, yes. And then the Aqua that was the other shade of blue. That's usually only noticeable through the base.
That's right. Because the base color is covered up by a marigold overlay.
Yeah. So the actual iridescence that they sprayed on it covered that aqua base glass.
That's right. And so unless you look through the base of it, you're probably not going to even realize that it's a blue shade in this case.
Right.
What we call
An ice, a lighter tone,
yeah.
pastel. So they had white, they had those shades of blue, and then the last one was
Then they made it an ice green.
ice green.
And ice green varies in shade from fairly light color to a more intense color. And the more intense color is really prettier than the lighter one, but they're really pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are stretchy, some of them aren't.
Right. So that was Diamond with the pastels, and that was 16, 17 era, right in that range.
It continued on a little longer, than the ice blue, I think.
Started in that
Yeah,
era.
that's right.
So it continued on, but then again, in a little bit later, they kind of came out with another color line, or another group of colors.
Yeah, I'd call it a color line.
Okay. And
That's the afterglow colors.
that's Afterglow.
The two primary afterglow colors, the two that Dugan actually
Diamond.
Diamond actually advertised as afterglow, are pink and lime green.
Right. And those within their iridized glass typically had an overlay. It was not always real easy to tell that the base glass was pink or lime green.
No, usually you had to look through the base, and sometimes pretty carefully to notice that it was, especially if it was pink.
Mm-hmm. And they also had a couple more colors. Oh, and by the way, this time period for the Afterglow was from where?
From probably 1923 or 24, maybe 25, through the end of the
business.
Yeah, before the fire took the company out of production.
Exactly. And there were a couple of other colors that they had within that same range, basic or time or pattern line, color line.
Yeah, there were at least two other colors that we would call afterglow today that Dugan or that Diamond didn't actually call afterglow, but there is amethyst covered by marigold, and there's a very light blue that has a marigold overlay.
Okay.
But there aren't very many pieces available in those two colors.
Okay, so they didn't have they weren't either real popular or something.
Well, my guess is that those colors were introduced very late, and we would have seen more of those colors had the factory survived.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Makes sense. And then the one other thing that we had thought we could mention was that Diamond is a very common manufacturer name for people who collect stretch glass, because they did a huge line of stretch glass patterns through that time frame
In the 1920s.
late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And they did a few of them in Carnival patterns where it was stretchy and in those patterns. But the one color that we hadn't mentioned yet that is only done, as far as we know, in red or in stretch is red.
Mm-hmm.
And they did have, we don't know of any
Carnival patterns that were
in red,
produced in red.
but they did have red as one of the colors that they did make.
The Diamond made
Exactly.
in non-patterned.
Right, right. So I think that takes us through the range of colors that we have for Diamond.
Except for a few oddball colors that turn up every now and then and are highly treasured by collectors who like unusual
Yes.
items, but they have to
Absolutely.
pay through the nose to get them.
Yes. Yes. It's interesting, and I'll just finish on this. It's interesting that with Diamond, although much of their glass did not have high quality iridescence, there are some things where they just really hit it out of the park.
They did.
And so there's a range. Definite range.
A much greater proportion of diamond glass isn't of particularly high quality, though.
Right, right. All right. I think that'll do it for Diamond.